confidence ran high. The masterstroke at Incheon and Seoul had smashed the North Korean enemy at hand. The Russians and Chinese had stayed clear. The forecast was good. Assuming victory, the UN command changed its strategy. As part of 10th Corps, the 1st Marine Division was sent climbing into the Sawtooth Taebaek Mountains on a headlong race for the Yalu River, the far northern border of North Korea. The 1st Marine Division was about to face an entirely different war. Private First Class Win Scott.
Everything froze. Our carbines wouldn't work, artillery rounds fell short, sometimes into our own positions. Morphine froze hard as stone. The corpsmen carried the syrettes in their mouths to keep them thawed out enough to help numb the wounded.
Second Lieutenant Patrick Rowe.
Around noon that day, an excited civilian appeared with the news that Chinese Army Patrol had entered his settlement and ordered all the civilians to evacuate their houses because 10,000 Chinese troops needed shelter.
In one of the greatest troop movements in history, 150,000 Communist Chinese regulars had marched through Manchuria undetected and surrounded the 1st Marine Division at the Chosin Reservoir, which is known to Koreans as Chonjin. Private First Class Robert Cameron was there.
I heard this racket down the slope. It was like a sound of Chinese birthday party, weddings, and the funeral all rolled into one. People chanting, blowing horns, ringing bells, clashing cymbals, beating drums.
At 2:30 in the morning, during a blinding snow squall, with the temperature jamming rifles and freezing hands at 20 below zero, the Chinese struck.
When the illumination rounds popped overhead, I saw a whole lot of people headed our way. I'm telling you, there were 1,000 individuals down there in massed infantry formation.
When dawn finally came, and the fury of Marine fighter planes arrived to drive off the surviving Chinese, the Marines on the ground had suffered enormous casualties, but their positions held. For 3 days and nights, things only got worse. The demonic cold and ferocious Chinese attacks exacted terrible tolls. The threat of annihilation hung over the chosen Marines. These were hardships that few Americans had ever endured. Task Force Faith, the Army forces on the east side of the reservoir, were cut off and nearly annihilated. Those who escaped did so across the ice. The ferocity of Task Force Drysdale's journey through Hellfire Valley, where a combined force of U.S. Marines, Army, and British Royal Marines was savagely battered by Chinese forces holding the surrounding high ground. And the epic stand and rescue at Tak Kong Pass, where the 250 Marines of Fox Company held a crucial high mountain pass for 5 days against an enemy regiment. Relief finally came from a battalion of Marines led by Lieutenant Colonel Raymond G. Davis, who fought their way through blizzard conditions in the dark and wind chills of 50 below zero to bushwhack across the wild mountain ridges and reinforce the Marines of Fox Company and release the Marines trapped to the north. Lieutenant Colonel Davis.
Some fellow Marines were in trouble. We were going to rescue them, and nothing was going to stand in our way.
The Marines counterattacked and fought their way clear of every ambush and penetration. Every Marine gave his all. Every inch would be a fight for their very existence. Private First Class Win Scott remembers.
There were bodies strapped on the barrels of artillery, on the sides of trucks, across hoods, anywhere there was space. The wounded guy next to me froze to death the second night.
As the column blasted its way mile by mile down the goat path of a road, in the bleak skies overhead, the Marine Air Ground Team revealed its full potential like never before. Diving into the canyons, strafing, bombing, and dropping napalm on any and everything that threatened their fellow Marines on the ground. After 15 days of some of the most brutal conditions and fighting any warriors have ever faced, the Marines, their dead, their wounded, reached Hungnam and the sea.